For those of us who wanted the Black Bay GMT in a smaller dimension, your wish has come true. Back in 2018, Tudor released the Black Bay GMT, which had a large presence no doubt, with its thick slab-sided case and long lug-to-lug. At the same time, Tudor released the first Black Bay 58, a vintage-inspired dive watch from 1958 with smaller dimensions to that of the Black Bay 41. And it left many of us wondering if they were ever going to release a Black Bay GMT with Black Bay 58 proportions. After all, they already had the Black Bay 41, which is considered their full-size diver. Then the Black Bay GMT came out, which essentially had the same dimension, and then the smaller Black Bay 58. The obvious missing piece in their lineup was a Black Bay 58 GMT, and that is what Tudor has offered last year. We now have a GMT that is smaller, lighter, and more importantly, thinner than any Tudor GMT in their current lineup. Released in 2024, this GMT continues the evolution of the Black Bay 58, a vintage-inspired dive watch with vintage-inspired dimensions. It's got a 39mm case, thickness of 12.7mm, lug-to-lug of 47.3mm, with a 20mm bracelet that tapers down to 16mm and jumps back up to 18mm at the clasp. The signed crown measures 6.6mm. The bracelet maintains those controversial faux rivets, but now includes the well-executed T-fit clasp. It's also got a domed sapphire crystal, 200 meters of water resistance, and anti-magnetic up to 15,000 Gauss. It's essentially a Black Bay 58 with a true GMT complication, but what's different inside is the caliber MT5450-U. This is a new movement from Tudor that's got a smaller form factor than the bigger Black Bay GMT. It's got a higher jewel count of 34 jewels compared to 28, and it's more than a millimeter thinner than the MT5652. It's got 65 hours of power reserve, and to make things even more impressive, the U in this caliber is only designated for movements that are COSC and METAS certified. Now, before it can even have the METAS stamp of approval, it must first meet two prerequisites. It must conform to the criteria of being Swiss-made, and it must be COSC certified. So without getting into too much detail, COSC certification requires the movement to be tested for accuracy at 2 different temperatures, in 6 different positions, at 2 different levels of power reserve, 100% and 33%. It also has a 10-second range of variation per day from -4 to +6 seconds. METAS certification goes a step further and includes testing on precision, resistance to magnetic fields, waterproofness, and power reserve. In terms of precision, it must be accurate to within 5 seconds a day, or 0 to +5 seconds. It also guarantees that the watch will be accurate when it's subject to magnetism of up to 15,000 Gauss. On the wrist, the Black Bay 58 GMT looks really good. It's comfortable, and the smaller dimension makes it suitable for everyday wear. If you're familiar with how the Black Bay 58 wears, this will be no different. Even though it's a little thicker because of that GMT movement, it still sits nice and low on the wrist. I don't see any issues with this watch sliding under a cuff. And let's be honest, it's a heck of a lot thinner than the Black Bay 41 GMT, which is about 14.6mm thick. The bezel finish actually surprised me a little bit. I was expecting it to be matte finished instead of gloss like the other Black Bay 58s. Either way, the aluminum insert still maintains the subtle vintage vibe it's meant to portray. The proportions are great for a vintage-inspired GMT on my 6.5-inch wrist, or any wrist at that. I feel it's such a neutral size that will fit the majority of men's wrists out there. Even though it's smaller than the full-size Black Bay, it still feels substantial. You've got a true GMT complication, an on-the-fly adjustment clasp system which works phenomenal by the way. The watch is highly anti-magnetic, highly legible, and great for traveling and tracking up to 3 time zones. It's got a lot of character with the gilt accents on the hands, indices, the printing on the dial, and the bezel markings. I also think the rivets on the bracelet add character and depth to the watch. It definitely adds to the vintage theme, and I'm glad they are sticking with this design feature even though they're not true rivets. If these were omitted, it would look like just about every other bracelet in the market. Moving on to the clasp, the T-fit clasp is probably one of the better designed toolless micro adjustment systems out there. The spring-loaded lift system is very smooth and glides into each position securely. Think of Rolex's glide lock system but with a spring-loaded action instead of a friction-fitted. Very well executed in my opinion. And I'm also glad that they addressed the lack of articulation on that first link by the flip lock. I remember my Black Bay 58 Blue did not articulate at all, thereby effectively having a fixed length at the clasp that was longer than the lug-to-lug of the watch itself. This has been resolved with this new T-fit design. The case has the same finishing as the original Black Bay 58. It's got the thin polished lines at the edge of the case, polished sides, and the rest being brushed. The only difference I see is the crown has wider knurlings and positioned lower to the case, and the bezel edge also has bigger teeth. Now after praising the watch, I have a couple of dislikes. The first one is what initially gave praise to Tudor's dive watches, and that is the bezel action. It just doesn't have that satisfactory click that the original Black Bay 58 had. It's probably because of the bidirectional nature of the operation, but I would have liked it to have more of a refined feeling where it glides into position, similar to Rolex's GMT Master 2. It's also hard to grip because it sits flush with the sides of the case, but the good thing is that it clicks securely without any backplay, so the build quality feels solid. So that's my review of this Black Bay 58 GMT. I think overall it's a great addition to Tudor's catalog. I think there's something for everybody, and if not, it's only a matter of time when Tudor designs a watch that's made for you. And this one is for people who like vintage watches, gilt accents, snowflake hands, and a solid GMT movement. Let me know your thoughts on this watch after the hype has settled down. Did Tudor hit a home run with this one, or do they still have a long way to go? Thanks for watching.